Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to 2021. I've missed you so much. It's funny, I got to see many Worcester people this past weekend, but I missed my masterwork people. Just a quick report on me and the pandemic. I have entered the bread baking phase of the pandemic, which does not, as it turns out, overlap at all with the weight loss portion of the pandemic. So, but I got to say, it's a good way to kill a couple hours in the afternoon. So I'm really excited about this particular Zoom. We've got a whole bunch of fun things for the spring, and we'll be together, the two groups, because I thought, sometimes it's more fun to hear from other people and about other people rather than doing like really high level music theory or music history. And I thought there's no better way to kick things off than with a couple of Broadway actors. And of course, the day of an inauguration means you've got to have somebody from Hamilton. So I am really lucky to have two great friends. I don't even think of them really as colleagues anymore. I just think of them as great friends. Rebecca Robbins, whom some of you will know from Wolfboro, from the Great Waters Festival. We did a Learner in Low program. And Antuan Magic Raimone, who is a friend of mine just socially from my years in New York. And when the pandemic stopped, he had been in Hamilton for a couple of years and had just taken a break from the Broadway cast to be in Chicago, and then was in Florida when it all stopped. So I just thought that it'd be really great to hear from them tonight about their lives, about how you end up, how an innocent young girl from West Virginia ends up on Broadway, or how a preternaturally worldly young man from Kansas City ends up. It is Kansas City, I got that right. Ends up on Broadway. So let me kick them off. And what we're going to do is the three of us are just going to chat. If you have any questions as we go along, you can save them for the end or put them in the chat. And eventually we'll end up talking about what a swing is, what a swing does, what is life like on Broadway, but also on tour, because both of them have been on tour with different shows, and what life is like for Broadway actors and actors in general during the pandemic when we have no idea what is to come. So Rebecca, I know you as a New Hampshire girl, but really you are West Virginia as well. So why don't you tell everybody, and I should say, by the way, just so, because she won't say this, Rebecca is one of the finest singers I've ever worked with, just a really tremendous soprano. And her route is very different from Antuan's. Antuan is a dancer and he came up through the more traditional musical theater college program, whereas Rebecca was going to be an opera star. But before that, she was in West Virginia. Why don't you kick things off? Oh, I think you are muted. Actually, both Antuan and Rebecca, you have to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Excellent. So I was in West Virginia studying singing with a very, very fine teacher. And it was time to go to college. So she gave me a list of colleges that she thought I should audition for. Okay. I'm from West Virginia. I don't know any of these places. And one of the colleges that was on the list was the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. And thank God I didn't know what Curtis was when I was 18, because I think I would have psyched myself out of that audition. And they took me. This girl from West Virginia who thought she could be an opera singer and had very limited repertoire, and they saw something, I guess, that sparked their interest. So I was at Curtis for 2 years, and this is kind of a secret, so we'll keep this between us. I didn't love my teacher when I was at Curtis. So I actually left Curtis, one, because I wasn't sure I wanted to be an opera singer. It takes a lot of work, a lot of precision, a lot of language, which I wasn't great at. So I left Curtis. I went back to West Virginia to study with my original voice teacher. And I give her 100% credit for my technique, for my voice, for everything, actually. And I grew up doing musical theater with the Charleston Light Opera Guild. And I did a couple shows with Jennifer Garner. And at this point, she was a hostess at a restaurant in New York City. So once I graduated college, I called her up and I said, Jennifer, I'm thinking about moving to New York. What do you think? She said, you're not going to really know until you get here and you try it out and you see if you like it, because it's not for everybody. So I went to visit her for a week and I thought I better maybe get a temp job so I can pay rent when I get here. So I went on a job interview in that 1 week, got a job, and I literally went home to West Virginia, packed up a U-Haul, and moved to New York City. And then I just started auditioning, and I had no clue what the professional world was like. So this was a time when we still had phone books. So I would look up the director in the phone book, and I would either write them a letter or I would call them and I would say, hey, what did you think of my audition?
Oh, God.
Yeah. But one story that will have a happy ending, I also wrote Hal Prince a letter from my desk as a temp. And I said, I would like to audition for Phantom of the Opera. And he wrote me back. I should have gotten that letter. I have it downstairs. Anyways, he said, thank you very much. Here's our casting director. This is how it works. And I will forward your resume, your little glossy black and white photo to our casting directors, and good luck.
Jeez.
So 15 years later.
So you were early 20s at this point.
I was literally right out of college. No clue what I was doing because, I had left Curtis, I had left the opera world, which is so different than musical theater. As far as, opera people usually have managers and, auditioners, it's so different auditioning. You usually have to pay for your accompanist as an opera singer and, you coach your repertoire forever. Meanwhile, you go to Broadway, you're there with a couple hundred other people, you get 16 bars. Yep. That's it.
What were your...
Some people count too.
What were your big audition pieces? Do you remember, Rebecca?
Oh my goodness. I think I had a nice cut of Glitter and Be Gay. Because see, I still was trying to make the transition between legit singer and opera singer. And I really didn't know where I fit. Fortunately, when I got to New York, it was still the time of big singer musicals. So it was possible to have a legit voice and have a career on Broadway. It's a little different now.
Yeah.
But
do you remember what some of the shows that you auditioned for early on?
Oh my word, I went to so many auditions on my lunch hour, before work, after work, and I was non-equity, which means I wasn't part of the union. So I would literally sit in the lobby for hours on end, hoping that they would get to me.
Actually, will you do us a favor and explain for people who don't know that world, the whole thing about equity and the catch as well, that once you are equity, in a way that makes some things harder too.
It does.
So just sort of give the.
So Actors Equity is the union for Broadway performers, tours, pretty much for Broadway, wouldn't you say, Antuan?
Yes, and it also covers stage managers.
Right. I knew there was something else. Yeah, so you have to, in order to work on Broadway, you have to be part of the union. And to be part of the union, you have to work a certain amount of shows. You have to get a certain amount of credits until you basically prove yourself that you're serious about this and you can join the union. And they give you your card, you pay your dues, you pay a membership fee, and then it gives you privileges. It also gives you health insurance. It gives you a pension. It gives you 401k. So that's certainly helpful in that regard. But it's tough because when you're non-union, you have no rights. You have no say. They don't have to hear you at an audition if you show up. But if you're a union, they are required. If you show up during the time of audition, they are required to hear you, even if it's 6 bars, which sometimes it can be. do
you remember any particularly humbling moments in all of those early auditions?
So many of them. It was a lot of trial and error for me.
Yeah.
It was also, oh, I just learned this song. I think it's going to be so great for this audition. First rule of musical theater, never take a brand new song to an audition ever. No matter how well you think you know that song, once those nerves kick in and, you're trying to impress, these three people who are sitting in front of you.
We're going to come back. We will come back and pick up this story because luckily it has a very good ending. So we're going to leave Rebecca young and callow doing all of these auditions in New York, and then come back later. Though, can I just ask one question because I know this about you? Oh, and I should say, everybody, in addition to working with Rebecca with a choir and orchestra in New Hampshire, I've played for her in 2 recitals that I have to say they're 2 of the most amazing experiences I've had, because she's such a great musician, such a great singer, but also it's true, people at your level that once a performance starts, there's this certain, this level of professionalism, and I adore playing for you. And one of the performances that we did, you talked a little bit about some influences. So do you want to just say a couple people either that you've worked with or that you listened to growing up that were huge influences for you?
Huge influences? Oh my goodness. Well, I'm a big fan of Jeanette MacDonald, which, if anybody knows, from the 30s, a lot of people are not fans of her voice, but I am. I adore her. She was a big influence on me early on. That's what got me into operetta and that whole, which is sort of the transition between the opera and musical theater world. I was a big fan of the recently late Rebecca Luker.
Oh,
she was my idol. Oh my goodness. To hear some of her original cast albums, Showboat, Music Man, Secret Garden. I mean, that for a young soprano coming into musical theater, she was the ideal.
because she just sang properly too.
Oh, she had the beautiful technique. Everything was so pure and it was so unaffected.
Yeah.
And it was just effortless. I mean, she was glorious. She was absolutely glorious. So she was a huge influence on me.
Is there my choirs will not have heard about this one, but is there an English singer actor with short red hair called Julie that you might want to credit?
Julie Andrews?
My Spaniards and I have an expression. What would Julie do?
Jules! I actually performed for Jules. Her first husband was a man named Tony Walton, and he designed our sets for A Tale of Two Cities, which was my Broadway debut. So they remained good friends even after they got divorced. And she came to see Tale of Two Cities one night, and she was sitting second row on the aisle. So all of us during the whole show were like, is she laughing? Is she smiling? Oh, what's she doing? I mean, it was so hard to perform because, I mean, literally there's our idol sitting in the second row. It was
awesome.
Amazing. But yes, Julie for sure. And I have one more person to add, and that was Marie Osmond.
Oh.
All right, a little bit of country.
Right? I was a huge fan of Donnie Marie. I had their Barbies. I thought that they were the bomb. I had all their records. Yes. Awesome. I think I've even tagged her in a couple social media posts. And now her kids follow me on Instagram.
Excellent. You're almost there. You're so close.
Now there's a claim to fame. Speaking of Middle America, hey Antuan, why don't you take us through growing up in Kansas City and then to Missouri State?
Yes. So I grew up in a suburb of Kansas City, Missouri, and as a little boy, I was in church choir. That's how I got into singing, and then eventually there was school choir, and then once I got to high school, we had a performing arts center attached to our high school, and the theater teacher would put together a big musical every spring with our shop teacher building the sets. Our school band was in the orchestra. She had a friend that they had worked at Worlds of Fun, which is a theme park in Kansas City, when they were kids, and he would come in and choreograph the shows for her. And so that's how I got into musical theater. And I love to dance. I wanted to be a professional dancer in the sense of like music videos. Like as a kid, my dream was to be a backup dancer for Janet Jackson, because that was my exposure to performance and entertainment was music videos, because my family didn't go see musicals or even plays. And then I discovered musical theater and realized I could sing, which I'd love to do, but was nervous about doing solo. And I could dance. And it's like, oh, I can do both of these things in one space. And so that got me into musical theater. And then my mother insisted that I go to college. I was the first in my family to go and graduate from college in my immediate family. And I knew that it would be in musical theater. That's what I wanted to study. She did not want me to go to a conservatory because she was hoping that I would discover some minor that would be outside of entertainment, which I never discovered. Had no intention of minoring in anything. And so I got my degree in musical theater.
Antuan,
Yeah.
so you talk about being in shows. Did you do dance classes and things like, where did your dance training come from?
That came
sorry, and I should say, sorry everybody, and this will emerge more as you hear more about Antuan's story. But he really is, although he's a great singer and actor, you would say dance is your primary.
Oh yes, it's what has booked me every job I've gotten in the last 22 years. And so I started formal dance training going into my senior year of high school. I was a very late starter. I had a lot of natural talent, a lot of natural flexibility, a lot of natural ability to pick up choreography. And the reason I started formal dance training was because my high school was doing Crazy for You, and I did not know how to tap dance. And though I could watch someone tap dance and I could mimic the rhythms and the sounds, I could not mimic the exact steps they were doing to make those sounds. So needing to know how to tap is what got me into formal dance training. And then I continued into college. So the extent of my formal dance training is about 4.5, 5 years. The rest is all gifts and talents that were bestowed upon me. And
Which
yeah.
by the way, is it's kind of a leitmotiv of any story that you hear about people who make it. Like, you know, you need to have some kind of superpower, really. It's just so hard to make it in these fields. So from the time you graduated to college, from college to New York, what happened during those years?
A lot of performing. My first professional job was actually in high school at Children's Theater. But after college, I moved back to Kansas City. I worked at a theater in Kansas City, did a production of Smokey Joe's Cafe. And then from there, I went and worked at Hershey Park for the summer. And then the fall of that year, after that summer at Hershey Park, I started working on cruise ships for Holland America. And I performed on cruise ships as an entertainer, as a dancer, mostly for 2 years, traveling around the world. And once that was kind of getting to the end of that second year, I just thought, okay, I feel that I've done all that I can do on a cruise ship, professionally speaking. And I was ready for my next challenge. And so for me, that was moving to New York.
Can you just take a second, because I know about your experience, you know, those couple of years on the cruise ship. That for everybody, it's a little bit like asking Rebecca to talk about the audition process. For a lot of particularly singer dancers, cruise ship is kind of a rite of passage, isn't it? Like there's this little world of performers who go off. So what is good about it? What's bad about it?
That depends on the person. So the good and great things are you're getting paid to travel. It is the most money I will ever get paid to do the least amount of work in my entire career, because our performance schedule is based off of how long a cruise is. So a 7-day cruise, we have 3 shows we perform. We perform 2 shows a night. If it's a 15-day cruise, we have 5 shows we perform over those 15 days. And I also did a world cruise, which is 108 days from beginning to end. And we had 5 shows. So we would do a show one night, do 2 shows, and the shows were between 30 and 45 minutes long. And then after that night of performance, we wouldn't have another show for sometimes a week and a half, 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
And still getting paid the same amount to just be on the ship and get off the ship. And
you stayed in those staterooms like we used to see on the Love Boat?
Oh, no. Our cabin, the crew cabin, our cabins, I would say, are probably the size of a incredibly modest walk-in closet.
Oh, God.
So, and we have no windows either, because they're interior cabins. And so once you turn the lights off, you can't even see your hand in front of your face. And I did not consider myself a late sleeper, but when you're sleeping in complete darkness and you have no concept of time, you can wake up thinking it's 9 or 10 and then look at a clock and see that it's 12:30 in the afternoon.
I hope we haven't just triggered all the claustrophobics on the Zoom. That is brutal. I don't care how many cities I get to see. There's no way that I could do that.
Yeah. And then it's also difficult for, to be away from your family because you're in the middle of the ocean or you're in different countries. And when I went on cruise ships, it was in 2003. And so, yes, there were cell phones, but I wasn't going to pay for an international phone card or SIM card or anything. And so for a lot of people, it was difficult to be away from their family for such a long time. And you're very isolated. You're working with the same people and seeing the same people, but unless you really are able to find a connection with your coworkers, it can be isolating. And then life on a cruise ship, living on a cruise ship is similar to, so say, imagine you work in an office building and you eat, you sleep there all day, and then you can be granted 8 hours of time outside of that building, and then you have to report back to that building. That's what working and living on a cruise ship is like. So after about 4 months, you want to swim to shore.
Yeah, suddenly doesn't sound glamorous. No, I've got to say, one of the ways that Antuan and I first bonded as friends was to figure out that he had been in Sydney when I was living there. So every cruise ship goes to Sydney. It's a big thing. So we're going to come back to you in a moment. Let's go back to Rebecca, because so now we've established sort of the early stages of both of your careers. Now get us to Broadway, Rebecca.
My goodness, that's a long journey. I just want to say too, all the shows I auditioned for in New York when I was living there, I didn't really book anything. I booked one gig, and that was Bronx Opera, which I came to do Broadway, and I booked an opera. Go figure. So it wasn't until I actually left New York, moved to Philly, started working in Philly, and then I would once in a while go back up to New York for a special audition that I finally booked a show in New York.
And you've had a long association with the Walnut Street Theater, right? Does that date from that period?
No, they didn't really hire me until I had some credits.
Yeah.
Really. A lot of those, especially back then, a lot of regional or local performers, they would only hire New York actors because they thought nobody local could possibly have the talent or the wherewithal to do a professional show, which couldn't be further from the truth.
Well, of course. So what was your first break then in New York?
My first big break was a show called The Pajama Game.
Oh, God.
Which was with City Center Encores. That's how I got my equity card.
Yeah.
And
those were great, and those are terrific productions.
They're incredible productions because they use the original scores. They have a huge, at least 22-piece orchestra on stage.
Yeah.
And when I first did Encores, that's when you actually could walk around with your book. Yeah. Encores has changed so much now that you pretty much have to be off book to do those shows now. It's insane. But they pick these little treasures from over the centuries. I mean, it's just so because when I first joined Encores, it was being sponsored by Newman's Own. the salad dressing, Paul Newman. So little did I know, at the closing night party, I started talking to this older couple like they were my friends. They said how much they enjoyed the show. And I said, oh my gosh, it's so nice of you to come. Do you see these encores very often? It's such an honor to be doing this. And so my friend whispers in my ear and he says, that's Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. My first show in New York, and and that was before we had cameras on our cell phones. So,
Nice.
So yeah, that was my first.
Just so we can get to talk about swing stuff, because that's so fascinating. Get us to Tale of Two Cities and how that went to Phantom then.
Tale of Two Cities was a long road because it was a brand new musical. It was written by one woman who wrote music, book, lyrics, which has never been done. And it was a long road raising, because you have to raise like $6 to $10 million just to open a show on Broadway, just to open. So we did a lot of readings, we did a lot of workshops.
So you were in that because that's a whole other topic that's fascinating, is to be part of a show way before it goes to Broadway. It's unbelievable how much work it is.
Oh my gosh, most people don't realize how much goes into those readings, unless you have a big company behind you like Disney or somebody who's just throwing money at you. But if you're just an average Joe Schmo who's written a musical, it's really hard to get producers to invest in your show because.
So you originated a role for her in that production.
Yeah, so I was with it for 5 years before we went to Broadway.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was like, are we gonna?
Yeah.
Do we have enough money now? And so we finally did. We made it to Broadway. And then it was 2 months after we closed. We didn't last very long on Broadway, unfortunately. But 2 months after we closed is when I was diagnosed with cancer. And so I thought that was the end of my career, because my cancer was Hodgkin's lymphoma and it was in my neck. So it was literally pressing on my larynx, right where my vocal cords are. So I thought, all this work, and now what's going to happen?
So would now be a good time to show the wig?
No. So I went through cancer treatment, and that's actually what took me back to Philadelphia, because I was sort of subletting in New York at the time, because I was doing, the Broadway show up there, and my husband was in Philly, and we were going back and forth. But once this happened, I thought, oh, you know what, maybe it's time to go back to Philly. So anyways, long story short, I lost my hair. We did chemo, we did radiation. It was just a big party. But one of the most beautiful things to come out of it was this was my hair before chemo. So the wig makers from A Tale of Two Cities cut off my hair almost at the root, and they hand tied this wig with all these individual hairs. And this is all my hair, so that I could wear it when I didn't have any hair.
Which is just amazing. And really,
it was such a gift. I feel so fortunate. And it
speaks so much to the theatrical community, doesn't it?
Oh man, when one of their own needs help,
yeah,
it's just a phenomenal place to be in the center of that. Because nobody can gather and just rally spirits like a bunch of Broadway performers.
and how important is that right now? So after you, thank God, recovered from the cancer, the universe rewarded you.
It rewarded me a few years later. I had auditioned for Phantom 5 times. Some of them were agent appointments, which was nice. That means you have an appointed time, you show up, you sing your song, it's great. But this particular time was a chorus call, which means you show up with 600 other women who all want the same part that you want. And you stand there in line, you get your number, and you pick your little 16 bars. So I went to the chorus call thinking, you know what, I'm just going to show up. People keep auditioning for shows, and so I decided I'm just going to throw it at the wall again. So I got a call back from that chorus call and didn't hear. Finally, I'm in New Hampshire. I'm at the Corner House Inn in Sandwich. And my agent calls and she said, Phantom called. They would like you to come into the show for 2 weeks as a vacation swing. And I was like, what the heck is a vacation swing? So it turns out a woman in the show had injured her knee. And so she needed to be out of the show for 2 weeks to do physical therapy and just do all that kind of
I'm
stuff.
sorry,
So
what were your exact location, the day that she injured her knee, Rebecca?
I was in Sandwich, New Hampshire at the
You had
corner
nothing,
West
you
End.
had
I was
nothing to
sitting
do
at
with
the
this
bar.
injury.
You'll never pin it on her ever.
So this is probably a good time to explain what a vacation swing is.
So basically, they have someone come in from the outside because that means everybody internally is otherwise booked. So they bring someone in from the outside. They teach them this one role, this one part, and they do it for however long. You know, it could be maternity leave, it could be an injury, it could be leave of absence for bereavement. I mean, any number of reasons why somebody might be out of the show. And this is your part for 2 weeks. And then at the end, they're like, okay, we'll call you.
And what is that like to learn? So at this point, Phantom has been this huge success for a couple decades. What is it like to have to, it's like a train already going 60 miles an hour and you have to jump on. Was it crazy?
There's a lot of precedent. I mean, everything is documented. Everything's written out. Every angle of your hand from, Korea. I mean, everything is written out. So what happens is the person is usually the dance captain of the show. They take this little person who doesn't know anything and they literally teach them the show. I had 3 days to learn the show before my first performance.
Oh
my God.
So, so you're learning the vocal part. Thank goodness I had listened to Phantom since I was in 6th grade.
Yeah.
So, and fortunately I was in for a first soprano.
Oh, good.
Thank goodness. So it's like sing the melody and just go here. And but then while I was there, I was like in the middle of my first week and they're like, actually, could you stay and learn a different part and do that next week? And I was like, Meanwhile, that second soprano, I'm like, oh no. So basically I would go in and out of the show and each time I was learning a new track. So by the end, I knew 6 tracks in the show. So whoever was out, and there was always somebody out of the show when you're in a long running show, because people have their lives to live. And if you've been doing a show for 10, 15 years, you're going to take time off to go to your, cousin's wedding, or you're going to have your life.
Because it is, as exciting as it is a job. It's
a job. It's a job. You have to fight through Times Square traffic to get to the stage door, and you think you're going to lose your mind. But then you get there and then you realize there's all these people. This is their first time seeing this show. And that's where the magic happens.
And which is interesting because I've talked to Raimone about that, and to Antuan about that, and he said the exact same thing. Can you just talk, because of course we're all musicians here, what is it like? Like, do you have any understanding of what your brain is doing when you have these 6 tracks? Like, would you occasionally just accidentally move to another, or how does it work?
That happens sometimes. We call it swing brain. And
yes, yes. All swings know what that term is.
Yeah, it's like literally your brain is divided into all these little pieces, and you're like, okay, this is this track tonight, and then tomorrow we're gonna do this track. And then sometimes there was a time when there were only 3 women in the show at Phantom. Everybody was sick. There was the flu going around.
Oh my God.
So we had to what we call split tracks.
Yeah.
So for the first 3 songs, I was this character, and then I had to change my clothes, and then I was in this track, and so I had to, take this prop off stage, because that's what that character does. And if you don't take that prop off stage, the show's gonna stop. So
because that's also it. You've got the different, obviously the different song parts, but the different costumes and costume changes and props and choreography and blocking, like it's really quite amazing. And how many of these tracks, Rebecca, did you have like little solo bits in some of the tracks as well?
Some of them. The first track that I went on is the busiest track in Phantom. It's called The Wardrobe Mistress. And she also is the confidant in the pseudo opera in the middle, Il Muto. And for anybody who's curious, if you Google James Corden, Phantom of the Opera, you will see me performing that scene with James Corden coming into the show when we were working out in LA.
Oh,
that's
wow.
really cool.
Yeah.
He's nice, right?
Oh my gosh. He's such a Broadway performer. He's just really one of us.
Yeah.
Truly.
That's so cool. Let's come back. I'm going to go over to Antuan, and then I just want you guys to be able to riff a bit, especially as you hear each other, on like funny things that happened over the time. Just give us a really quick rundown. How many years were you in Phantom, or what years on Broadway? And then you did the national tour as well. So just when were you on Broadway?
So I started with the Broadway company in 2012. And then I was there till 2015. And then in 2015, I left to do the tour, and I was on tour for 2 months. Now, I do want to explain one difference. The version that was on the road at the time was by a different director. It's the same music, different choreographer, different director.
Oh, wow.
So I was singing the same songs,
Oh my God.
wearing the same clothes, doing different things.
Wow.
Ugh, yeah.
So that actually was more mind-blowing than being a swing. Having to
That's
relearn.
fascinating.
You had to relearn, but you still had this muscle memory, because when I sing this is the move that I do.
Yeah.
And it's like, no.
And this is why I've never been a swing. I should say also to the Worcester Chorus, by the way, that we had lined up, you may remember this, we'd lined up Rebecca to do Carmina Burana and a mini cabaret with me. And it was when she went back out on tour. And the whole thing, I did learn in my years in New York, when you work with people at that level, you just have to give them a hug and send them out. You know, these opportunities, they come as they come.
Sometimes you can't plan for it, because even you don't know. I mean, you could have auditioned 2 months ago, forgotten all about it, and your agent calls and says, they want you, they need you next week.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
insane.
it's so hard to plan your life.
But we will
business.
get Rebecca with both groups eventually. Antuan, so how did you meet Lin-Manuel? Let's jump ahead to In the Heights and let's get you to New York.
So I moved to New York in 2006 and spent in February of 2006. I'm actually coming up on my 15-year anniversary in a few weeks. And I spent the better part of a month to 6 weeks auditioning every day, 5 days a week, sometimes 2 auditions a day. And in 2007, there was an open audition for the chorus of In the Heights, which at the time was off Broadway. And I went in to audition for that. The audition started at 10 a.m. I think I first went into the room around 11 a.m. and I was there until about 5:30 p.m. I made it through 4 different rounds of choreography. So they would bring in a group, teach them something. There's 30 people in the room. We want these people to stay, and then you wait. So that happened all day. At the end of the day, we are asked to come in with our own prepared song. And I sang Too Darn Hot from Kiss Me Kate. That was my go-to audition song when I moved to New York. And I sang the song. I left, didn't hear anything for about 2 weeks. I was working a part-time job downtown. It was a pop-up store, a pop-up retail shop that a friend of mine told me about. And one night we were closing up the store, I get a phone call. It was a 212 area code, and the joke is Broadway is calling. So I asked my friend, like, can I take this call? I was like, yeah, of course. It's just the 2 of us in the store. So I step out of the room, I pick up the phone, and it's nighttime. It's like 9 o'clock at night. So I'm not expecting any calls from anyone theater related. And it's the production office, casting office for the show, saying that they wanted to hire me also as a vacation swing.
Oh, cool.
For the off-Broadway production. I said, that's great. What is it? What does that mean? Because I had never heard of it. And so they explained what that was. Actually, I had a callback. Sorry, there was a callback 2 weeks before that, and I hadn't seen the show. I hadn't even heard the music to it yet, and I was able to get a ticket to the show before my actual callback, so I could have an idea of the material they gave me, because 2 of the songs were raps, and I was like, I don't rap. And so I saw the show, fell in love with the show the first time I saw it, and actually at intermission, I said, God, if there is any way for me to be a part of the show, please make it happen. A good friend of mine, yes, she did. A good friend of mine who plays piano very well, she helped me learn the material they sent me for the callback. And I went into my callback and performed Too Darn Hot, my song, and then also performed one of the songs they had given me to prepare, maybe 2 of them. I can't remember at this point. What I did not realize at the time was that Lin-Manuel Miranda was in that room. He must not have been in the show when I saw it, because I didn't recognize his face, as was the music director and the director. And I didn't know who any of those people were. And so I just like walked in and did what I needed to do. And I left and I felt really good about it. Then that's when they called me 2 weeks later to offer me the position as vacation swing. I started rehearsals immediately and was with them for the end of their off-Broadway run, which was about 2.5 months. And then the show moved to Broadway, and not knowing what that transition would be like when they started having auditions for the Broadway production, I went to an open audition because to audition again. And I remember walking into the room, and so many of my friends that were in the Broadway show were there assisting and helping the choreographer. And they said, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "I don't know how this works. I want to make sure I still have a job." And they're like, "Okay," because I didn't have the relationship they had with other people in the show.
Yeah.
And when I walked into the room, the choreographer saw me and he said, "What are you doing here? There's no auditioning for you. Get out of here." I was like, "Okay." And so then I just had to sit around and wait for them to call me. And so then shortly after the Tonys in 2008, they called me again to come back into the show. And then I was with the show off and on from 2008 until it closed in 2011. I went out on the first national tour as a swing and dance captain and understudy of one of the supporting leads. I was the assistant choreographer for the non-equity tour of the show. And I even was the associate choreographer for a production of it in Westchester, at Westchester Broadway Dinner Theater a few years ago. So I worked with them with that show for about 5 years. And that experience with that cast, both off Broadway and Broadway, was a dream. It's like, even a dream does not encompass like the feeling and the reality of what that experience was. And I've told people, if from the day I decided I wanted to do musical theater to the day I actually made my Broadway debut, if I was making a list of these are the things I hope will exist once I make my Broadway debut, I would never have imagined the friends and the family and the love and the support, as well as how challenging and inspired I would be by every person I worked with every day going to work. The appreciation and the understanding of not only their talents, but of the importance of the show to the audience, the importance of the show to the cast, was and is still the most remarkable experience I've ever had in my professional life. And I'm currently in Hamilton.
Yeah, that's really cool. And you can only, I mean, just because Lin-Manuel Miranda has become such a huge figure that, I mean, that's part of his origin story now, isn't it? And all of you are part of that. And it's interesting, Rebecca, I don't think I'd put together this before, but you both have taken shows from off Broadway onto Broadway. And that, it strikes me, that would have its own just incredible sense of excitement as well, to be able to be part of something that is just burgeoning and swelling and taking on momentum.
Yeah, to be part of an original cast. First of all, I just want to say I saw In the Heights 3 times. I love that show. I thought it was amazing. I probably saw you and didn't even know it.
Maybe. And actually, I saw Tale of Two Cities, so it's very probable that I would have seen you.
You would have seen me. I only
That's
did one
amazing.
show.
It only took 38 minutes before two Broadway actors told each other how wonderful they are. That's actually, I believe that's a record. What were you going to say about In the Heights, Rebecca?
Oh, I love the show, but to be part of an original Broadway cast, I mean, it's great to be part of any Broadway cast, don't get me wrong, but to be part of that original cast, because there's such a camaraderie and it's a family, because you've been through the blood, sweat, and tears of getting this show to where it is. And just that reward of taking your curtain call, that very first opening night, it's just,
oh, it's got to be amazing.
There's nothing like it. I mean,
let me just do one more thing, and I'm going to come back to Rebecca. But Antuan, I want you to, if you can, reflect on. So we heard from Rebecca about the different tracks as a singer and actor, but of course, for you as a dancer, there's some even more specific challenges, right? And if you can tell, because I don't know if you guys see on the screen that Antuan's stage name is Magic. And I just love the story of who gave you that nickname and why, because this is your superpower, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So so my given name is not Antuan Magic Raimone. That's my stage name, but the magic part was given to me when I joined In the Heights off Broadway. So I have a very unique talent and skill to be able to watch choreography a few times and pick up the nuances and the intricacies of that. And so when I was being taught this show, I learned my first full track in, I think, 2 weeks. And then each swing that came in after me cursed my existence because they just thought everyone works and learns this way. And so one of the dance captains that was teaching me the show, he would show me something a few times, and then I would say, "Okay, what's next?" And he was not used to that retort, and so he's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yes. What's next?" And so we'd move along, and when we came back the next day, I had retained everything he had taught me the previous day, and it really, really shocked him because he had been in several Broadway shows before and had been a swing before, and he has a great mind for that. And so the cast was just kind of asking him, "Oh, how's the new guy?" Like, "He's great. I show him something a few times and he gets it. He's like magic. He's magic." And so he started calling me Magic. This was in 2007. And he has called me that almost exclusively since we've known each other.
But how cool to completely accidentally discover that you have this ability that is so specifically helpful to the kind of job that you've landed in. So let's jump ahead to Hamilton. How many different, do you call them tracks as well as a dancer?
Yes.
Yeah. So how many different tracks do you do? And I don't know how many of you guys have seen it. Luckily, I got a very cheap producer's ticket from Antuan as a thank you.
I saw in Chicago.
Oh, I was in that company as well.
We'll get to this. We have to define what a universal swing is as well. Antuan, by the way, it sounds like Rebecca has been stalking you for some time. We'll give you a moment together at the end. So anybody who's seen it, it is just an extraordinarily physical show. So is it even harder then to keep the different tracks separate? What has it been like?
Well, I'm not a fair barometer to ask because I'm a little higher on the bell curve than most other swings. I'm just going to say that. I'm just going to own that. And so it is a very difficult job. And with Hamilton, I am what is called a universal swing. And so what a universal swing is, that means I cover the entire male ensemble for Hamilton, and there are 6 men in the male chorus. And I do that for every U.S. company of Hamilton, and there are currently 5 U.S. companies of Hamilton.
Oh, God.
So that means I can be sent anywhere across the country as needed to perform any one of those 6 tracks.
And how little time are they entitled to give you?
24 hours is, they will try not to give me less than 24 hours. Thankfully, they haven't. The shortest I think I've gotten was 32 hours notice that I'd be flying to Chicago. And so with that, and what makes Hamilton also very unique in its structure is there are times when everyone on stage is doing the same movement, but most of the time they are not. So if I am performing one person stage left, his movement can be completely opposite to another person stage right. And if I'm switching between those two from one day to the next day or one show to the next show, I have to know which person am I, what is my positioning, what arm am I doing on this count. And also when I go to different companies, even though it is the same choreographer, the same director, the same music director, they have taken freedom to sort of, well, based off of who we've hired for this production of the show, we want this man to sing tenor 1. We want this man to sing tenor 2. We want this man to sing baritone, which is different from this
Oh
other.
God, so they actually change the tracks.
Yes, and the same goes for choreography. So what I know as we delineate them, man 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Man 1 in Chicago could mostly be the same as New York's man 1, but it might also have some sprinklings of man 2. And so I have to know what all of those recipes are.
Yeah.
So imagine like you make chocolate chip cookies, but if you have 15 people bake a batch of chocolate chip cookies, it could all have different minor ingredients. And I have to know all of the master ingredients.
And you could have to do it on 32 hours notice.
Exactly.
Oh my Lord.
I've even flown back to New York from Chicago and went into Act 2 for a track I had never done in New York with no rehearsal, only having watched the New York video on the plane.
Oh my God, that is insane.
That is phenomenal. It's like mind blowing.
Did anybody get hurt, Antoine?
No, thankfully.
That's just amazing.
I think I had a headache after the show, though.
Oh, I can only imagine. But this is another thing, and I'm just conscious of time because as everybody knows, I like to keep Zooms a bit tight, but I could talk to you guys for hours, and I do want to be able to take questions. And if people need to disappear, that's perfectly fine. But I know, because you and I have talked about this, that the life of the, and feel free to jump in on this too, Rebecca, that you're contractually obliged with Hamilton. You've got to be in the dressing room during every show, and often aren't used at all. And that's just really boring, isn't it? That's not glamorous.
It's not glamorous. I won't say it's boring. There are days when I'm thankful that my job is to just sit. But yes, I have to be at the theater a minimum of 30 minutes before the show starts. And then there is a time towards the end of the show that they will let us leave. It's like, okay, this is the point in the show where if people have made it this far, they're finishing the show, you can leave, it's fine. And so there, I have spent many a nights watching Hulu or Netflix on my tablet or my computer during the show, but I have to be ready at a moment's notice. And I could be in full street clothes, and I have been in full street clothes, to then get a text or a call over the PA system. Antuan, please, we need you in costume to be this person. And so it's getting into my costume, getting my microphone, getting upstairs, and then just walking out on stage as if I had started the show at the beginning with everyone else.
Oh, God. And my last question for you, and then I've was something a bit different for Rebecca. So Hamilton is Hamilton. I mean, it's just there are so few shows in our lifetimes that have been the juggernaut that it has been. And as Rebecca said earlier, which is sort of interesting because now Hamilton is a little bit more like Phantom in that it's been around for a while. What is it like to know, as Rebecca said, that for each person in the audience, this is the first time, for many, the first time they've seen it, and it is probably the most important thing they're going to do that month? What's it like? Does that help to keep it alive for you?
Absolutely. Especially on the days when whatever you've done before you move into the theater, before you get to the theater, is life, and like you're running errands and you're on phone calls and whatever that is, like the days when you don't feel like going to work. And then for me, especially if I'm performing that night, I have a very specific routine that I have at least 2 hours before I get to the theater.
Oh, wow.
When I'm eating, what time I'm eating, how long it takes me to get to the theater. My vocal warm-ups always happen at home during the day before I get to the theater. My physical warm-up happens at the theater. And for me, like that's my time to transition from this was my day to now I'm at work. And so that's that separation for me. And if I can, I love to warm up either on the stage or in the house, like wherever there's space, because I don't want to be surrounded by the cast, because I'm going to spend the next 3 hours so connected with them. I need that time for myself. And so that is really nice for me. And then once we start hearing the murmur and the rustle of the audience coming in, and that was something that I learned back when I did In the Heights. You know, so Chris Jackson, who plays George Washington, who played the original George Washington for Hamilton, he would lead a cast circle up for In the Heights, and he would always say, this will be the first time someone sees this show, and it'll also be the last time someone may see this show. And it really puts that into perspective. And so I constantly try to remind myself, even if this is the 500th time I've done this show, and it's my 4th track of the week, and it's only Thursday, and I've had rehearsals and I will have more rehearsals, all of that can exist. And also someone is in that audience who has paid thousands of dollars and also traveled thousands of miles. I met a family of 5 that flew from Ireland to Chicago, arrived that morning, saw the show that night, and were flying back to Ireland the next morning. So it's like people, like it was that important for that family to do that. And to know that that exists for people, that that's a reality and a truth for people, it allows a perspective for me to like, okay, I can withstand these 3 hours for the sake of what someone is going to get from their experience here.
You know, I actually, Rebecca, I'm not gonna ask my question, because I'm gonna finish with you two before questions there, because I don't know what all of my wonderful singers are thinking when they hear that, but isn't that something that we miss right now about not being able to perform? That it is that thrill, isn't it, of knowing that whatever we brought to the hall in terms of the mess of our day, as soon as we open our mouths to sing the opening and the glory of the Lord from Messiah, it's as much about them out there as it is about us. And it's just so cool to hear you guys from your perspective share that. Wow, that I could talk to you all night. That is just awesome. But I know that people are going to want to ask questions, so I'm going to open things up. If you have I'm not quite sure, Danny, you might have a great way of doing this. I think it'd be nice if people actually get to ask a question themselves. So if you want to literally raise your hand and then unmute yourself, that would be great. Don't be shy. As you can tell, they are talkers, these actors. They will not mind answering a question. It would be nice if you addressed it to one or the other, or said straight out, this is for either of you who'd like to take it. So who would like to ask something? Who would like to ask for a refund from when they saw Hamilton and felt that the guy doing the swing of Man 3 was a little tired that night?
That would not have been me.
So raise your hand. We are looking, and so Tom Irwin, here we go. Here's a question.
I was wondering, when you have to make a decision quickly, how how adaptable are the wardrobe you have to wear? Do you ever show up with the wrong wardrobe on?
Oh, let me think. Sometimes that has happened. Well, so for me, like there's an entire wardrobe crew, and their responsibility is to have our pieces there. And so for me, when I'm traveling from city to city, if it's short notice, they'll say, okay, we're going to actually send you with a suitcase of your base items because we won't have time to ship your entire wardrobe. So you'll have to borrow a coat or a hat from another actor in the city you're going to go to. So when I get there, I let the wardrobe crew at the city I'm coming to, I let them know, and they know that in advance as well, but I also help them out. So sometimes it's a matter of like, I physically don't have the piece that I need because they couldn't send it on time. But there's like a whole staff and crew there to set up our costumes for us. But sometimes mistakes happen and people can't find something, or in a rush, someone grabbed your piece that you needed and they didn't know until you get on stage and you realize the sleeves are too short or too long.
And Rebecca, Phantom surely is very wardrobe heavy, right?
Oh, very wardrobe heavy. In fact, I have one dress that weighs 40 pounds.
Ooh.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any nights where just the wrong?
Yeah, I mean, literally, you put it on, you're like, oh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, those costumes,
Oh my God.
you have to be fit for your costume.
Yeah.
Because one, they're so old. I mean, a lot of them are still, very early made costumes because it cost an enormous amount to make some of these, because they did not cut corners when they first made these costumes at Phantom. And once that precedent is set, you can't change it.
Yeah. It never occurred to me that swings that creates.
They have their own wardrobes.
Yeah.
I had all my own costumes for whatever.
I probably have at least 50 pieces just for me myself.
Oh wow.
Like and that covers every person that I cover in the show. So yeah, I could travel with, trunks of clothes.
That's very cool. Oh, what a great question, Tom. Okay, next question.
Janet had put one in the chat.
I
don't know if she's still here.
What do you feel? Oh, sounds like an exhilarating life and a lot of hard work. What do you feel you are giving up to do this? Or do you not feel that you're making any sacrifices? That is a great question. Rebecca, why don't you go first?
You actually are giving up a lot. You have to walk away from a lot of family obligations because you have a show, and maybe, especially doing regional theater and things like that, maybe you don't have an understudy, or maybe your understudy's not ready. So, I've had to miss my niece's wedding. I've had to, pull out of concerts. Oh, sorry, I got a national tour, I gotta go. So you try to make plans, and then, if this is your career and this is your job, they could call you on a moment's notice for anything. So it's hard to make plans. It's hard to, I think as you get older as an actor, you sort of kind of put your foot down and you kind of say, no, this is my life and I need to have this time for my family or whatever my priority is. Because as a young actor, you don't say no to anything.
Yeah.
So it's hard. You have to set boundaries.
Antuan, any thoughts?
Same, I'd echo just about all of that. I've missed some graduations of nieces and nephews. Even one of my sisters, she right out of high school went into the Navy and was a career naval officer. And then after that decided to go back and get her degree. And I missed her graduation from college because I was away for work and was a little afraid to say, like, I need to take this time off for this. As well as relationships, being in a relationship, starting a relationship, meeting someone, saying, oh, like, we've just met, it's been 2 months. And then, oh, I just got this job that's going to take me out of the city for 2 months or more or longer. And there are a lot of sacrifices. And also, those were sacrifices I was willing to make at that time. And again, as Rebecca said, as you get older, you are willing to make less of those And so you ask for what you need. And ideally, you're in a position and you're working with people who respect you enough and understand your value and who you are as a person outside of a performer, and they're willing to work with you to make that happen.
And it helps. And that's where equity can be useful, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. Paul Dexter.
Yes, so I have a question. So when you're in a show and you're working, and you know that it's going to keep going, what do you? And it's I presume it's in the evening, or mostly in the evening, except for matinees, I suppose. What is the rest of your day like?
Rebecca.
Well, it's very pedestrian. I go to the grocery store, I stand in line at Trader Joe's, I make dinner for me and my husband. You know, I send out emails. Maybe I'll try to learn a new piece of music if I have an audition for something else. It's life. You know, but you know, you have to like either, a lot of times I have to take a nap.
Yeah.
I just need a little quick, like, okay, I just need a little something, a refresher to get my energy up, you know, to go again at 8 o'clock, because it's a weird schedule. I mean, basically it's third shift work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same. And I've realized within my first year of Hamilton how much my time during the day was being dictated by what I might have to do at night, even though I wouldn't know if I was performing that night, who I was performing for. And so if I didn't need to go to the grocery store, unless there was something I needed to do, I would just stay home and just kind of like stay at a minimal energy expansion. And then again, a nap, dinner, and then get to the theater. But there are some people who do more, like, I mean, because it just all kind of depends. If you have an audition, if you're working on a workshop, if you're doing something else, then you add to that during your day, and you also have to go do a show at night. And that has always made me very, very nervous. The idea of having to split my energies in two places in one day has made me very nervous. So I've probably not sought out as many other opportunities as could have been available to me, because I was like, I just want to focus on this one area here.
Very cool. We'll take 2 more questions. Did I see Dawn and Diane? Oh, yes. And then Perch, you can finish up. Okay, Dawn, go ahead.
Once you've succeeded in a couple of good shows, a couple of good runs, are the next shows easier to come by, or are you starting from scratch every time around?
It's like an Etch-a-Sketch.
Right?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you do kind of start over, because every show has their own casting directors. So maybe that casting director knows you, but like the casting director from Hamilton has no idea who I am. So I would be like starting from scratch, and they say, oh, you know, she does have a couple shows on her resume, but she's a singer. She doesn't fit our show. You know, so you kind of are starting from scratch. And, you know, when you're in New York, there's a lot of people who have done other Broadway shows. I mean, I could be sitting in audition with people who have done 10 Broadway shows.
Mm-hmm.
And we're both sitting in the same line, in the same rehearsal, waiting for the same audition for the same job.
How do you guys sorry, Don, but I'm going to follow on from there. How do you buck yourselves up during those periods? I mean, I should say, Antuan, I hope you don't mind if I say, if I mention this, but one of the periods of our friendship, Antuan was between shows, was between in the Heights and Hamilton. And it was just a little period where it was hard to get stuff. He's the best, by the way, the best apartment sitter you could ever hope for. It was way cleaner when I when I went back. But I remember Antuan just thinking, I was always so impressed that you didn't seem to let it get you down. But I thought I just could never live like that.
When I decided to get into this, my mother, who admittedly doesn't know a lot about, she knows as much as she's learned over the course of my career, and also based on what I've told her. But she knew that entertainment in general was difficult because I have two older sisters, and the oldest was a model, and then she was also a singer, and she tried out some singing groups, like more pop music. And so through that, my mom also learned just how difficult the entertainment business is. And so she said, it's going to be hard. And I knew that. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But I know this is what I'm meant to do and what I want to do. And I'm going to find a way to do it. And so I understood that coming in. And I had a high school theater teacher say to me once, if you don't show up, you'll never get the job. Like you have to show up. Like that's the best chance you'll get at getting the job. And so for me, it was just a matter of, okay, once I know where to show up and know what I need to do, then that's what I'll do. And so I just kept doing that over and over again. And to, speak to the point of Chris saying like, I'm a great house sitter, that came from, I'd been doing some work as an assistant choreographer and associate choreographer with friends of mine. But there was this particular period in 2014 when I was moving out of an existing apartment, had 2 months before I could move into the new one. I had no job and didn't know where I was going to be living for those 2 months before I moved into the next apartment. It just so happened to be the time when Chris was going back to Sydney, and we were having dinner, and I just was like, oh, this is what's going on with me. And he's like, oh, well, I'll be out of the country. Would you want to
Clean my apartment?
Yeah. And I was like, and did I cry? I felt like I may have cried. I don't know. Maybe I cried later because, again, it's like I had no income and I had no prospects of work, and I really didn't know where I was going to be sleeping in a number of weeks. And so to have like a friend offer for me to stay in their apartment for 2 months, which was the exact amount of time that I seemingly had no home, was such a gift. And so it's in those moments is great when you have people in your life that can support you in ways that they may not even be aware of the importance and magnitude of that.
But imagine for all of us who have day jobs, and that's somebody who has had a successful career on Broadway. That's how insane that entire industry is. Okay, Perch, you're not allowed to ask for a job or a role, but you can ask any other question. Wrapping up here, Kathy Perch from Worcester.
I think my second graders would miss me, Chris.
I think that's true.
So thank you so much for sharing your stories and listening to your stories and the hard knocks and everything that you did coming up. But we all have that, as Chris alluded to, that moment when we step on the stage, and we're so blessed to have all that melt away. But there are those moments that transcend even more than that. What's yours?
Oh, great question. Rebecca, why don't you go first?
Wait, I just want to make sure I understand the question.
Like those moments in performing that have just been like the
one time
apex of your life.
Oh man. Well, I can tell you one of the most emotional for me performances was the first time I stood on that staircase to do Masquerade. Like literally when the curtain goes up and the audience goes, and they see this incredible staircase. And for me, that first time, I had just lost my sister to brain cancer.
Okay.
And she was my biggest cheerleader. Like when I got my first job, she sent me a Western Union telegram.
Oh.
I mean, she was just so old fashioned. And so she so wanted this for me. So I was standing on that staircase and all I could think of was, she would be so proud of me in this moment. And I am so living this moment for her. So for me, that's that first performance of Masquerade on the staircase.
That's poetic. And Antuan.
I have two. So one of them, my father passed away in 2014, unexpectedly. He never got to see me in the Heights. He never made it to New York, and he also never made it. And that was also before I ever booked Hamilton. So for me, like each bow that I take each time I'm in the show, like I gesture up to him. And then the second is that I was able to get my mother, and not at all at the same time, but my mother, my two older sisters, and my best friend, who is like another sister to me, they've all been able to see me perform in Hamilton. And especially for my two sisters, they've always been in a different state than I have. And so they've seen some of the shows I've done over the years, but for them to get to see me in Hamilton, that's been really wonderful, just because they've always been supportive, whether or not they could be in the theater. And so that's a wonderful moment.
So cool. I'm going to finish with one Rebecca Robbins story. I don't know if you're going to remember this, but it involves people from Masterwork. So I lived up in the Heights. I lived in Washington Heights, and Rebecca I think you were staying nearby for some reason. So we met for dinner.
I was subletting.
We may have had a couple glasses of wine and stopped off at a little Frank's Market, a bougie little grocery store nearby. And we're standing there, and this woman looks over as if to recognize someone. And she, to her dying day, Rebecca will deny this, but she suddenly got on her face that expression that a diva gets when she's recognized in public, because I'm sure that it's happened before. This woman came over. I'm like, oh God, I've had too much to drink to deal with this. The woman came up to me because she had seen me conduct Masterwork the previous week. Oh, that, by the way, was my crowning moment in my career, to be recognized ahead of a Broadway star. So, thank you for providing that moment. Hey, everybody, just give a little silent clap. Thank you so much, guys. It was really entertaining. And on the day of inauguration, we had to have somebody from Hamilton, where it happened. So
I'm in Philly. Does that count?
And yeah. Philadelphia. It's where it all started.
It's where it all started.
So thanks, guys. And be on the lookout for more information. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much.